Yo, what's up? Flying is one of the hardest skills to get in Enlisted or any other similar game, but also one of the strongest ones. And on top of it, it's very fun once you know how to do it. Flying and using planes is especially important if you want to get out of complicated situations like being camped by enemy gray zone tanks or being bullied by enemy planes, especially double plane situations where you get constantly bombed. But also simply reaching high BR is reason enough to learn flying, because this is where you will encounter the strongest and most dangerous enemy planes, but also the strongest and best planes for you to use yourself. So let's learn how to fly in Enlisted. You learn flying the fastest not by trying to fly in normal games, but by using the practice mode, because here you won't be interrupted by enemies and also don't have all of the stress of normal games. And also I recommend everyone to start with one of the most average planes in the game, because if you know how to fly an average plane, you will be able to fly every plane, and you won't rely on very good flying characteristics, which usually leads to crashing with the harder to fly planes. And the best example for that is the German-Romanian IAR that you get on BR1, very early unlockable for the Germans, which has average speed, average climb rate, and average turn rate. Speed means how fast you can fly the fastest. Climb rate means how fast you can fly upwards. It also gives you a limit on how high you can actually get. And best turn rate means how fast you can turn sideways. All of these characteristics are very important, because the slower you are, the usually, worse your plane is. The slower your climb rate is, the harder it becomes for you and slower to get altitude, so to get up, which is also a problem, because in order to bomb you want to be as high as possible. In order to see a lot on the map you want to be high, and in order to see enemy planes and get away from them, climbing high is also very useful. And of course turn rate is very important, because you don't just want to fly in a straight line, you will constantly have to turn around. And the worse you are at turning, the slower you will be with your bombing and then resupplying ammunitions, and also the worse you will be at dogfights or catching up to enemy planes or evading them. So all of these stats matter a lot. And now let's try our average German plane. Here are all the basics. I recommend everyone to do this practice if you're completely new for flying. If you already know how to fly, you can fast forward and see the harder to do things. So first thing to learn is how do you actually stay in the sky and don't crash. As you can see, I don't touch the keyboard or the mouse, and the plane stays perfectly in the sky. Okay? So the fewer inputs you give, the less things can go wrong. Most people do the mistake of having their hand on the mouse and then they start shaking and then they get imprecise and things can go sideways. But yeah, if you don't need to turn directions, you don't want to touch your mouse. And if you touch it with only 3 fingers or 2 fingers, to avoid having the whole weight of your hand on the mouse, which also can give problems. Of course, depending on your mouse, this is more or less of a problem, but in general, especially new players, do the mistake of putting too much weight on the mouse, causing them to crash. Then, what's the difference between keyboard input and mouse input? Very simple. Your plane usually flies in a straight line. If you use your A or D key, you won't turn sideways, you will turn around the central axis in a circular motion. So if you just hold left, you will spin left, and if you hold right, you will spin right. So you can't change your direction by using these 2 keys. If you click S on an inversed key setting, I will show you my settings later too, you go upwards, but here's the important part. You go upwards, but then you go back down automatically. If you turn down, or if you turn W, you will go down first too, but then you also go up again. So using these keyboard keys won't change your overall direction, it will always bring you back to the center. Now, unless you combine them, then you drift a bit, but even then you still go back to the center. If you want to change directions, you want to use your mouse. These keyboard keys, by the way, also, if you want to be as precise as possible, you want to preferably use only them. Because if you, for example, are following an enemy plane and you want to shoot it down, and you have your cursor perfectly on the enemy, using the mouse can easily ruin your aim and get you off the target. But if you use only your key to your keyboard to correct your directions, you will have more precision. This is very important to know in dogfights because every single shot can count there. Alright, after knowing how to use the keyboard, now we want to use the mouse, which is the harder part. So first of all, I put the hand on the mouse, and first thing I see, alright, there's more weight, and every single movement changes the direction. If I put my mouse forward, the plane goes up. If I put it towards me, it goes down. And if I move the mouse to the left, the plane goes to the left. And you can see it moves to the left, but it also spins to the left. And if I go right, it goes to the right and spins to the right. Now here's the first important part. Look at the horizon. If I go in a, I can try following the horizon, which by the way a good exercise to try to stay precise with your mouse on the plane. Because if you're not precise, you can overspin your plane and lose, exactly this is going to happen, and lose your balance. So try to just fly in a straight line in the beginning and not crash. This should usually take a few minutes for completely new players, completely new pilots. And after knowing how to do this, here's how you change actual directions and how you fly sideways. For this you can either only use your mouse, and then you just need to get a feeling how to use it. If you want to change the direction just a little bit, just move it a little bit. If you need to go faster, you want to have your plane in a spin, and then you can be faster. And then keep on moving the mouse. If you want to fly slowly sideways, but react fast, you want a spin, so you go this way. But then you hold your mouse this way, and don't keep pushing forward, because this will just turn you around. So the more you move your mouse and the longer you keep the movement, the faster and more intense your reaction of the plane will be. Now, here's the important part. You can be even faster than that, because if you combine keyboard inputs with your mouse, you will actually get your fastest possible movements. These are complicated, but I'm going to show you them now anyways, because all you need to do is, if you have trouble, just repeat the first part of the video, just repeat the practices until you're stable, and then you can just do this harder part. So, if I'm flying forward, if I want to turn left, first I do is I click A to spin, and then I move with my mouse. Because now, instead of having to go against much pressure, I just spin, and then there's much less pressure, and I can counter pressure, and I can much faster react. Also, once you spinned, start clicking S, because then you will be even better accelerated. So you want, for the fastest way to turn left, click A, then S, and then also help with your mouse, and then you see how ridiculously fast we are. You can also do the same thing to move right. Just click D, and then S again, and then also your mouse. And you can see if you do it too intensely, your plane will even start flying downwards. So you want to keep a good balance. You want to, for fast reactions, first we need to fly out of the gray zone. For fast reactions, click A first and then D, but don't click it, well, let's put it this way. If for a fast left turn, I click A and then S, I will start falling down. Now, you can avoid this by clicking A, S, and then correct with the mouse upwards. Because then you prevent your plane from falling down, and you get your maximum acceleration to the left side. So this is you see a precise, perfect straight line, and we do the same for the right side, and this is how you do very fast turns. This is quite hard to learn if you're new, so spend a few minutes repeating this until you can do it. Now that you know the basics, it's time for the advanced stuff. And for that you need to understand what the numbers on the top left of the screen mean. TAS stands for true airspeed and tells you how fast you're flying through the air. It's different from the normal speed indicators, which are modified by air conditions, but TAS isn't. So this is your actual real speed. Then second number is altitude, how high you are. Very important, because if you go too low, you will crash into the ground or into trees or into buildings, so always stay as high as possible. General rule is you want to, if you approach a target, be basically always above 500. If you want to get advantages on enemy planes, you want to reach around 1000. Because most enemy planes will never fly higher than 600 or 700, and this way you can stay out of the usual area of enemy visibility. And then the throttle, this is basically the percentage of your engine. If you're flying on 110, it means you're, compared to 100% of your engine power, fly with additional engine power. Most planes, especially German planes, don't have a problem with that. So if you want to be as fast as possible, you want to always fly with 110. Many American planes, and due to Lend-Lease also Soviet planes, start overheating if you're flying them with 110, but even if you're flying them with 99. So then in that case you want to start with your mouse scroll button to go down to 77 or 88 to start cooling your engine until it becomes normal again, and then you can accelerate again. This is important because if you want to do a turn, being slower helps you a bit. You don't want to go too slow, you don't want to go 0, but you want to, from 110, go down to something like 77 or 88. So this is the first trick. Then gears. Gear is basically the wheels you have on your plane. You basically never need them unless you want to land your plane nicely on the ground, which you only need in the Pacific if you want to land your plane on a carrier to repair it. But for air stuff you don't need it. Make sure you never have your gear down, because this will slow you down and ruin your aerodynamics, turning you more into a brick than a nice plane. Then flaps, this is the important part. If you click 2, you can set it to 3 different settings, and if you click 1, you can, well, go back on your settings. The different settings basically mean how intense, how open your flaps are. The more open they are, the more drag you get, meaning the more resistance you have in the air, and the slower you get, but also the easier it becomes for you to climb, and the easier and faster it becomes for you to turn. This is the absolute importance of flaps, and now we're going to learn how to use them. And air brakes is, some planes like dive bombers have air brakes. You can activate them too, though for Enlisted you basically never need to use them, because you can do nice dive bombing even without air brakes, and oftentimes they even break, which they shouldn't. So yeah, air brakes is not necessary. So how do we do a perfectly fast direction change to the left or to the right? Well, as we already know, now by the slow method you go A, S, and then with the mouse. Yep, but now we accelerate this by first throttling down to 77, activating combat flaps, and now we do this. And you can see, yes, it's so fast that I even had to move my mouse faster than expected. Yeah, you see, my mouse goes faster than my screen goes. This is how nicely it reacts. If you go to takeoff flaps, you get even more reaction time, but you become overall slower. So the optimal way is, if you want to be a world-class pilot, let's say there's an enemy behind us and we want to outturn him, we go down, take off, and start turning, and this way we can outturn him quickly. Depending on the plane, either combat or takeoff is better. For this plane I just noticed combat is much better, as will be for most planes, so just memorize. If you want to turn quickly, go into combat. Now we're gonna do it again. So we're flying and enemies behind us. We go down and instant turn. And then all you need to do is just keep turning. Because eventually you will, since you're constantly flying and sideways, you will land behind him. This can take, depending on the plane, on your and his plane, it can take either 20 seconds or 1 minute. But as long as you keep doing this, and his plane isn't much better in turning than yours, you will land behind him. The only mistakes you can do in this case is if you go up or down, because as you can see, if you go up, you obviously go A in a diagonal line and you go against gravity, slowing you down. This means you're turning much slower, so never do this. You want to turn as fast as possible. And if you go down, it's also not that good, because it makes it easier for the enemy to kill you, because you once again go in a diagonal line. Going down lets you turn a bit faster, yeah. If you become really good at controlling your plane, you can use this to actually turn very fast, as you can see. But only do this once you're good at flying, because otherwise you will instantly crash into the ground. Also, going down gives you the advantage of possibly him losing you, and then you can also start shooting him from underneath. So, this is everything you need to know about how to fly the plane. Except for how to actually do turns in the sky. Now, you can, and quite often, you will want to change your direction not by turning, but by going up. Why? Very simple. Let's say you're approaching the enemy objective, and we want to bomb the center of this village. I already have a bombing guide, so I recommend to watch this, because there's lots of different stuff regarding bombing. Now I'm bombing here. And the first thing I want to do is instantly get altitude. And this is the mistake most pilots do. They don't think about how high they are, but being high as possible is the most important thing for pilots. Because the lower to the ground you are, the less options you have for movement. For example, I'm up here, I can see everything, and I have enough time to react and shake, and I can even bomb 2 different directions. But if I'm too low to the ground, I can't. So the higher you are, the more time you have, and also the better outmaneuver and easier outmaneuver you can other pilots. But once you bombed, in order to bomb precisely, you need to get close to the ground. So after you bombed, you want to start instantly climbing into the sky. And you can see I'm climbing, and since this plane has a very slow climb rate, I literally can't climb any higher. Yep, I try to climb, but I'm stuck at around 700. I can climb a bit higher, but you see once again there's a problem. These numbers, as in real life, are very important to constantly observe, because this here are perfect sky conditions, and you even have, in contrast to the blue sky, a red ground. So you always know where you are. For example, now I know I'm upside down because the sky seems to be green-red. Now it's normal again. But if you're flying in rain or storm conditions, or if you're flying on some snow maps, literally everything will be gray after a certain altitude. And oftentimes, after you start climbing, for example, now everything is blue, I don't see the ground. Now, I know that I'm flying upwards because I don't see any ground, yeah. But if you're in a snow map, you will literally not see the difference between snow white and gray heaven. For that, you always want to look at the altitude number to see whether you're climbing or not. Pilots do this in real life too, especially World War II pilots, and without that they would be blind and constantly crash into the ground, especially during hard maneuvers and dogfights where you're being chased by enemies. When it comes to dogfights, people like to use fancy and hard and unreliable tricks, and I can tell you out of experience they don't work against really good pilots. And they're hard to pull off, and they also slow you down, so you can barely spend time killing the enemies. Now, what I'm going to show you now is basically everything you need to know about dogfights and air combat against enemy planes. Because it works, and it's very efficient. And it's exactly what you want as a pilot enlisted, because being a pilot enlisted is not about flying around in the air, it's about causing as much damage as possible on the ground, and also deal with some air targets. Now, let's say we're being chased by an enemy pilot. He will see a white air indicator in front of him. What you want to do is, you want to make it as hard for him as possible to hit you. There are multiple ways to do this. The easiest way is to make his lead indicator, so the white circle, unreliable. Because the indicator is calculated by how your pilot is aligned in the sky. If you change your alignment, the indicator will start shaking for him and he won't have any help from that. So if I start shaking like this with the mouse, his indicator will be thrown off. The problem is if I only shake up and down, he can just aim in the center and will hit me. But if I start shaking in multiple directions with the mouse, yep, this is where the problem starts, because now he can't hit me anymore. Exactly, and the faster you are, the stronger the distortion for the indicator will be. So if you fly around this way, basically 95% of all pilots can't hit you anymore because they don't know how to aim. You see me this doing very rarely in games because it looks annoying to watch. So yeah, I don't do this if I want to record a game for someone to see. But again, in very problematic situations, this is exactly what you want to do. If you have trouble finding your center again, you can just circulate in a circle around the center and then change the direction occasionally, and then this also works. So this is the first thing. Then second thing, how you shake off enemy planes. You can either go climbing or you can either go turning to the sides. Now what do you want to do? It is a hard question because it depends on two factors. A, how good is your plane at turning and climbing, and how good is the enemy plane at turning and climbing. And this is exactly where you want to do, as in real life pilots also did, some research, because you want to go into the tech tree, and before you use your plane you want to learn it inside out, like a true pilot, so you know what is your plane good at and what not. This plane is literally not good at anything, it's just medium at anything. So what I would do if I flew this plane in BR2 or BR1, I would look at, as a German pilot, what the Soviets and what the Americans have, which are the most used planes in these BRs, which you can see in my BR2 guide, where I show you the best planes to use, which is basically what everyone is copying. And then you look at what do these planes do. If you are flying a plane that doesn't have a good turn rate, but has a high climb rate, and the enemy planes aren't good at climbing, then you know, alright, climbing is exactly what I want to do. And to climb faster, you also want to activate combat flaps, because you can see normal climbing and you can see combat climbing instantly faster. So, yep, and then you just keep climbing until you're, well, quite high. And with a normal plane, we would be able to keep climbing until we spin backwards. But we can't do it with this plane because it can't climb well. And this is where you know, alright, with this plane you will never climb against an enemy plane because he will just shoot you. The purpose of climbing is that if you start climbing, at first you slow down because obviously flying against gravity is bad and hard. But the enemy also has to correct slightly upwards to hit you. But if your climb rate is much better than the enemy plane's climb rate, he won't be able to pull up high enough. For example, this plane can be easily out-climbed. So if I'm playing an American or a Soviet plane on low BR, I will always climb upwards if I know the German enemy is playing this average plane. And most players are playing this plane because it has very strong bombs. So yeah, as an American, I would know I have to climb. If it's the other way around, if I'm a German and I'm playing this plane, I know I will never climb, because then I'm literally just making it easy for him. Instead, I have to turn. It's my only options. So in that case, I would do what we just learned. Slow down, activate combat flaps, and turn to the side. Now, if you know your plane is bad at everything, which is usually the case for attacker planes, especially on lower BRs, because they're usually very cumbersome, you can't expect to out-climb and you can't expect to out-turn. In that case, you need to shake to make it harder for him to hit you. And depending on the enemy nation planes, for example, Japanese planes have very little ammunition. So in these cases, all you need to do is you just need to shake around for 1 minute and he runs out of bullets. And this works. This also works against many low BR planes, which also come with little ammunition. So this is a really good trick. And the other trick is, if your plane is very clumsy and there's no other thing to do, the last chance you have to save yourself is just by trying to go sideways and also down and into a maneuver. Now this type of maneuver is quite hard to pull off, but it will save your ass constantly. Because especially after getting shot once, enemies usually assume when you start falling down like a bag of stone that they hit you and you will die. And they will stop chasing you. And this maneuver is exactly what gives you around 20 seconds of time. Where the enemy sees, alright, you're dropping down, he can fly away. So you do your maneuver, your distraction maneuver, and after he flew away, you just turn around, start climbing, and now you're behind him and you can shoot him. So how do you do this maneuver? Very simple. First you need enough altitude, which is another reason to always be at least 500 meters up. Because if you start doing this with a too low altitude, you obviously will crash instantly. Also, you preferably do it with a well maneuverable plane, which this isn't, but you can even do it with this if you're good at it. Now let's imagine we're getting shot at and we get our first damage, and the first thing I do is, once again, I go into the turn rate mode, but instead of just turning sideways, I start spinning down. And when I see, okay, I'm too low, I change direction and start going up again. And if you reach the ground level, you want to start turning, because then you actually have a good chance of outturning the enemy. And when you see, alright, the enemy isn't shooting anymore, or you outturned him, you can start climbing again. But if you see, okay, he's still behind me, you still want to turn. Also keep in mind, you can fly through the trees as long as you're touching the tips, because this is where they only have leaves. Even though they should have in real life some harder parts, but in Enlisted they only have leaves on the top parts. I can even fly through this area and you can see I'm surviving. So, and once you see the enemy start shooting at you, you start climbing instantly as fast as possible. And then you shoot him, and congratulations, this is how you will basically win 95 to 99% of all of your dogfights in Enlisted. This is how you do your intel research on your and your enemy planes. Let's say you want to play Germans and you're playing this plane. You look at what stats do you have. In order to do precise comparisons, don't look at your plane, which might already be upgraded, which you always should do, because it gives you insane advantages, basically making everything around your plane better. But then you can't really compare it. So you want to look at the pure tech tree stats, and we can see 550 speed, 17 climb, and 17 turn. Okay, 550, 17, 17. If you're playing against Americans, let's say the average fighter plane you will see is a Spitfire. He's got 590 speed, he's a bit faster, but here's the problem. He's got 22 climb. It's 5 seconds better. 5 meters per second better. This is an insane advantage. So if you start climbing against him, you will instantly be shot down. You can't outclimb him, but he can outclimb you. And you hope he better doesn't know it. And his turn rate is also insane. It's under 15 seconds, which is something you can't beat with a German plane. So yeah, if you're against him, your only chance of surviving is to start the central cursor shaking and spinning, and then do the dropping maneuver. Most of the time you won't need to do the maneuver, because look at his weaponry. He's got only 60 shots per cannon that are dangerous, and then he only has weak ammunition. Now, what does this mean exactly? Well, here's how you can estimate and evaluate the strength of the weaponry and of these numbers. Regarding speed, it depends on the BR. Anything around 500 kilometers per hour is normal for low BR. So this is nothing special. For mid BR, you want to reach 600 to 700. And for high BR, you absolutely need to have around 700, because otherwise you're too slow. Regarding climb rates, it's easy to remember because the standard numbers are exact opposites of each other. If you look at your IRR, anything that's close to 20 or higher for a climb rate is good, and if it's close to 15, it's bad to very bad. And this plane is exactly in the middle. So, alright, very medium. For turn rates, it's the opposite of a climb rate. Anything that's close to 15 is good, and anything under 15 is insanely good. But if your turn rate is close to 20, it's bad, and anything above 20 is extremely bad. So these are the standard numbers, standard metrics you want to see. Between 15 and 20, or outside of 15 and 20, how is your plane aligned? If I was a new player and I wanted to play this German fighter plane, I would do my research on the American and the Soviet planes. Now first, with the American planes, I can expect, let's say, an average enemy of P-38G, and I see, alright, he's insanely faster than me, so flying away doesn't work. His climb rate is a bit better than mine. I wouldn't want to outclimb him, but well, he won't be able to outclimb me either, because he's not that much better. And his turn rate, well, it's worse than mine. So climb rate differences aren't that important, but turn rate differences are, even at just 1 second difference, matters a lot. Because climb rate, you have a higher distance you have to fly, or a longer line, and you go against gravity, and you also have some other problematic factors. But turn rates, there you have a shorter line you have to fly, so every single little advantage matters more. And of course, as you learned, you can accelerate this turn rate by using your flaps and flying downwards using gravity, so you get even better advantages. So even little advantages for the turn rate are absolutely worth it and worth mentioning. So if you're being a German and you're getting chased by an American plane, you can expect the P-38G, which is the best attacker plane in low BR, or you can expect, well, the fighter plane, which has, of course, insanely good characteristic. It's insanely fast, insanely good climb rate, and though turn rate that's a little bit worse than yours. So you know, alright, in any case, you need to outturn the American enemy planes, because there's no other way for you to shake it off. If you're flying against Soviets, you can expect SB2M, if it's an attacker plane behind you, and you see, oh, he's insanely slow. Good. His climb rate is weaker than mine, but not that much weaker, alright. So I could theoretically outclimb him. And his turn rate, oh my god, this is a completely outlier. This is a complete outlier. He's got one of the best turn rates in the game. Turn rates in the game of 12. So usually attacker planes have very bad turn rates and also bad climb rates. This one has an insanely good. So you don't really want to outturn him. You likely just want to shake around with your cursor and then quickly fly away. Because if he's much slower than you, all you need to do is go into 110% throttle and then just keep flying in a straight line for 30 seconds. Eventually he will be too far behind you and you're safe. If you're flying against the average fighter plane for the Soviets, it will be ironically enough an American one, the P-40E, which is similarly fast as you, bit better climb rate, similar turn rate. Yep, you can't really fly away, he will catch up to you, and your only chance again is either doing the dropping maneuver or just doing the, well, do the circle spinning and then drop maneuver, because you won't really be able to win with anything else. He's got two good stats. And if he's playing a Yak, the classical Soviet fighter plane, yeah, he's even faster, his climb rate is also good, and his turn rate is even more dangerous for you. So you see, with this plane, with the German IAR, you don't really have many options to successfully do maneuvers. And this is the mistake most players do. They see some maneuver online, or they look up World War II maneuvers, and they try to pull them off, but they don't work. Well, they can't work if the numbers don't allow it. Yeah. And World War II pilots also learned the numbers, and they saw, alright, what can work and what not. No World War II pilot with this plane would try to do a climb battle against against a P-40E because he knew death rate is very close to 90% or even higher. Now, the last metric about planes important to know is the weapons they carry. Now, this is in detail explained in the bombing guide. In general, you want to have 100 kilogram bombs to kill infantry easily and to kill weak to medium tanks, and for anything BR 4 and 5 you want the heavy bombs to reliably kill the enemy tanks. If you get a very perfect hit, you can even kill a King Tiger with a 50 kilogram bomb, but you need to get extremely lucky, and you need to aim perfectly well, and you need to hope the bomb doesn't jump off, which happens often, and the tank also has to stay on his spot, which he won't. So yeah, you better carry high bomb loads for high BRs, and for low BRs, low bombs are fine. This is, by the way, a reason why the Focke-Wulf D9 is highly overrated. It comes with 8 little bombs, and people think, oh, I can carpet bomb the whole map and everything dies. Well, no, because, well, you won't get any tank kills with this. This is the problem. It's simply not good, and it's very expensive. The Tech 3 version literally comes with a heavy bomb. And one heavy bomb is better than 8 little bombs. Absolutely. So, regarding the weaponry of cannons and machine guns, this is more complicated and very important to understand. The smaller the caliber, the faster the bullet flies, because it's lighter. This means, if you're shooting at something with machine guns, you will, even on longer distances, be able to aim more precisely and hit the target easier. This is very good, but you will barely do any damage. On low BR, small machine guns are fine. On higher BR, they're not. Higher BRs, they're not really fine. On anything starting BR 3 and higher, you want HMGs, so around 12 millimeter, or you want auto cannons, which by definition is anything starting with 20 millimeters. Problem is, if it's an HMG, it flies already quite a bit slower, but still fast enough. So HMGs, for example, the American famous 12.7 millimeter Brownings, they are perfect. They are not slow. They're still fast enough, and they deal good damage, and they shred every target. There's no plane in the game, no matter how tanky it is, you won't be able to kill with your HMGs. You just need to shoot a bit longer at them. But if you're using autocannons, like once again our problem child IAR, you're gonna deal much more damage to enemy planes and also deal some explosion damage on the ground. Not much, but still quite good to blow up APCs and weakly armored tanks and also groups of enemies, of infantry. But against planes, these bullets fly very slowly, so it's harder to hit. And now comes the big problem. Your lead indicator isn't perfectly aligned for your ammunition. Especially not if you have very differently behaving bullets. Here you have the fastest bullets possible, long machine gun bullets, and you have slow 20 millimeter autocannon bullets. Meaning, if you're aiming perfectly with your indicator, at least one of those bullet types will miss. Now, with a lot of good aim and good feeling and experience, you can mitigate this problem and become better, yes, but always keep this in mind. Planes with very different types of bullets aren't that good. What you rather want to have is the same type of bullets. This, by the way, one of the many reasons, the Americans stuck to just massing more of the same. Because if you have six HMGs or caliber 50s, as real soldiers would say, it's very easy for you to actually hit your targets, and your lead indicator will also be very precise, and your bullets are flying perfectly. But if you have the average German plane, and we can look at one of the worst offenders in this case, of course the Focke-Wulfs, which are usually the worst contender for flying characteristics. Here you have very slow flying 20 millimeters and insanely slow flying 30 millimeter bullets. This means hitting with this plane is extremely hard, and you need to aim very far ahead in front of your lead indicator. But even then, since the bullets are flying slowly, you will have trouble to hit, but autocannons are also firing slower. Meaning the saturation, the bullet saturation that you get on your target is smaller. So it's a much higher chance for your enemy plane to fly in between the big gaps you create in the sky with the bullets. If you have a fast firing machine gun, there's basically no gap in the sky for the enemy while you're shooting at him. But if you have big gaps due to slow firing and slow flying munition and slow firing cannons, it becomes very easy for your enemy to just fly through the gaps, and your hitting the target becomes very unreliable. So this is the big problem. Keep that always in mind. Big numbers like these look very beguiling, but they're also misleading because it's very hard to hit something. So if you're actively searching for a plane that can easily shoot down enemy targets, there's literally nothing better than the standard American setup of a big amount of HMGs. This is also the reason why something like the A20G is very strong, because it also comes with 6 heavy machine guns straight in the nose. And this means if you just touch anything with it, it likely will feel 3 or 4 of these and will be instantly dead. Now, what's the difference between machine guns in the nose and machine guns on the wings? Very simple. If they're all centered in the nose, you will hit an area that has this shape, which is roughly the shape of the center of a plane. So if you hit something with this plane, it very likely blows up instantly because you hit it with multiple HMGs at once. And also due to the pressure, the plane will get tilted and will lose its balance. So this is very effective. But you need to, since the area is quite small, it's a bit harder to actually get a hit on the target. The opposite of this is of course the wing design of the P-51, because here you have a much broader field. Because what you want to do is, since you have these 2 wings, you want to, let's say the enemy is flying here in front of you, you just want to fly in a line and align yourself parallel to the enemy plane, and then no matter what he's going to do, it's very likely that one of your 2 wings is going to hit him. And this is also the reason why these machine guns were exactly placed this way. It makes it very easy to hit the target, very high chance to hit it, and once again, since it's going to likely get hit by 2 HMGs at once, or even 3 if you're lucky, there's no realistic chance for him to survive, because the damage is immense. So this is all the knowledge about the different ammunition types and what is good and what not. Regarding damage and where you would need to shoot, well, most of the time you can't choose where you shoot. You just shoot at the lead indicator and hope to hit. Yeah, your only time or situations where you can choose what to hit on the enemy plane is if you're very close behind it. In that case, you want to usually hit the tail, because if you break the tail, the plane has no control anymore. It's impossible to control a plane without these 2 tail parts, because then you will start drifting upwards and eventually fall down, and your wings won't help you. So breaking the tail is by far the most effective way to get rid of a plane. Also, you basically reduce the enemy chance to hit you to 0, because he can't control his plane, he won't be able to turn around and shoot you. Another important thing to notice is that if you are dogfighting, never expose your belly, because this is usually not well armored. It's much better to expose the front of your nose to him, then the belly. So let's say you're flying from the right, he's flying from the left. In order to not crash into each other, one will have to fly up and the other have to fly under him. You always want to be the one who flies underneath, because for the most planes in this game, being shot slightly from the top into your nose is better, even if you're getting shot into the cockpit, than being shot from underneath. So this is an important thing to understand, and also a mistake you want to avoid, because I constantly see people, when we are flying frontally against each other, doing this mistake, and this leads to very easy dogfight wins, which you don't want to give your enemy. For the end, let's talk about the pilots themselves, because they're also important, since you can do many things with them. Of course, you can equip them and you can perk them, but you can also use them as infantry. The most underrated thing in Enlisted possibly are high crew number planes, like planes with 3, 4, or 5 soldiers or pilots, because even after you get shot down, or while you're being shot down, before you get shot down, you can just jump out of the plane and land safely with your parachute and then keep on fighting as an infanterist. This of course also works with your normal pilot. So here's the usual decision making. If you're in a dogfight and you know you will lose because you're getting shot and you already have too much damage, in order to save time, you can either self-delete your pilot, because then you can instantly spawn your next plane, or if it makes more sense to survive, you can instantly jump out. For that, start flying if possible downwards and then jump out, because this gives you a little bit more speed for your pilot to escape, because if you fly in a straight line and jump out, it becomes easier for the enemy pilot to still shoot you in the sky. So this is the first thing. And if you're playing the really good planes, like of course the Junkers 188, where you're getting 5 crew members, you're basically having a paratrooper squad that comes with 6 heavy bombs. Because normal paratroopers are 6 soldiers, here you have 5. That doesn't make much difference, but here with a plane you have more control where you're gonna land, because you can actually fly around wherever you want, you can drop heavy bombs on the targets, and you can eject whenever you want. So this is always a very strong option, and it's also even useful with just 3 soldiers, because if you're using the Soviet equivalent, the Tu-2S, you get 4 soldiers, which is also great, and you have a more active plane because you have frontal cannons, and well, also you can fly around, you also get some really good flying characteristics, and you can very precisely fly above your target and then jump out and land perfectly where you want and keep on fighting with your soldiers. This is especially good if you're an attacker and low on tickets and you're losing a game and you need to blow up enemies on the ground, because it doesn't bring you any advantage to spawn an infantry squad and just die fighting against the enemy infantries. This is not how you cap. The only way to capture is by dropping 6 bombs on the objective and behind, killing everyone and then jump out and then cap the empty objective. Yeah, so always keep this strategy in mind. This is a classical noob mistake of people not doing this, although it's absolutely essential for high quality enlisted gaming. Regarding the equipment of your soldiers, well, you always want to dual wield, because the game literally gives you no other option. Since you can't have a backpack, they already have their parachute, so you will have a second weapon. Give them a second weapon. Doesn't need to be something too expensive, doesn't even need to be upgraded, just give them whatever you have. If you're short on silver, for normal planes with 1 pilot, it literally doesn't have to be optimized. Only for the planes where you actually expect to use them as paratroopers, you want perfect weapon setups, but for these normal planes it's not that important. But still you have the option for 2 weapons. Always give them an X, because you will have to run around and you want to charge. Also of course a flask. And then usually an anti-tank mine or TNT charge to blow up tanks, because oftentimes you will be dropping down where the enemies have their gray zone tanks. And you absolutely want to be able to blow them up. And then a random pistol and a grenade. More importantly, what are the perks? Here's the big problem. It it matters a lot for your pilots whether they are pilot 1, 2 or 3. This is one of the classes where it matters the most actually, because you want to always get your vitality and you always want to get your detection range. Now you will have enough vitality points no matter what, so then just give them some fillers. But here comes the problem. Detection range shows you enemy planes earlier on the map and identifies them earlier as an enemy or a friend. This is extremely important, so you always want this. But you also want this detection to be active on the sides, so your peripheral vision. Problem is both cost yellow, and the eye perk and the pizza perk obviously are conflicting with each other. And the lower tiered your soldier is, the fewer of the pizza perk you can get. So you want, if possible, to grind pilots, if you like playing them, quickly, so you unlock the high tiered pilots and can give them the higher perks. For example, currently, Americans don't even get Attacker Pilot 3. The Germans do get them. And here, you get, well, more of this yellow, so I can give him a third pizza perk, compared to the American who only gets 2. And regarding the other point setup, if you expect to use the soldier as a paratrooper, you want to have the less landing damage, and then healing and faster walking. And yep, that's basically all for the green. There's not much else you would want. If you're using the pilot mostly as a pure fighter, like basically every fighter plane, and most attacker planes too, you want to have him with the head swinging sharp maneuver perk, because then you black out less often, which happens sometimes in the practice range that I showed you. When you do 2 sharp maneuvers without having this perk, you will black out much more often, which can become a problem. So this is also quite useful. And vitality, extremely underrated. Why? Because quite often you get shot, but you survive. But if you don't survive, well, you die. So vitality, useful on pilots. You don't need the overload endurance. Not really that important, especially if you already have this perk. But you much rather have vitality, especially on soldiers you want to use as paratroopers. Alright, that's it. Now you know everything there is to know about flying planes in Enlisted, winning dogfights, and also lots of advanced understanding that very few players playing this game or even playing War Thunder have. In addition to this, I also have a bomb guide that goes into detail regarding how to actually hit your enemy targets on the ground and how to use different types of attacker planes optimally. For example, slow bombing, fast bombing under pressure, dive bombing, and so on. Also have multiple shorts that explain this quickly, like a short for dive bombing and a short for using rockets. Everything linked down below in the comments as usual, as well as an extremely entertaining BI5 Soviets game, where the German tanks and planes were so oppressive that the only thing that could save us and prevent us from losing was some extreme Soviet plane gameplay. And of course, if you're new to the channel, subscribe, and if you learned something, like it too. And if you know anyone who wants or needs to become a better pilot in Enlisted, share this video with him, and we're gonna have many more interesting battles together. Until next time, goodbye.